So, come to find out that the Artemis isn't the only bow accessory for the Quest. DeadEyeVR reached out with the ShadowShot. And well, it's time I eat my hat and also try this one out for good measure. This is the ShadowShot, a physical bow accessory designed to work with VR archery games on the Quest. Unlike the Wonder Fitter Artemis bow that we looked at before, this one claims to work with all VR archery games. Pretty bold claim, so let's put it to the test and see if it delivers. The ShadowShot is designed to give you the physical sensation of drawing a real bow while playing VR archery games. It's compatible with the Quest 2, 3, 3S, and Pro controllers, and it can be used either left or right-handed. What makes this bow different from other options like the Artemis bow is that it doesn't rely on sensors or specific SDK integrations. Instead, it uses a purely mechanical approach, which theoretically allows it to work with any VR game that features archery. Setting up the ShadowShot is relatively straightforward. First, make sure everything is oriented correctly. The finger hold should be at the top along with the controller mount. Insert the two rods into the main body with the hooks facing forward. String the bow. It's easiest to start from the bottom. Make sure the finger grips are at the top. Then set the bow on the floor, bend it slightly, and loop the top of the string around the top rod. Add the controller cup. The mount is designed to work with different Quest controllers, and there's markings inside the cup that tell you where to place the included pads for a better fit. I'm using the Quest 3, so I needed to add 2 pads. Slide the cup into the bow and insert the screw to connect them. Use the included Allen wrench to tighten it. Quick note, mine actually didn't initially come with the screw for the controller mount, so I had to get one sent separately. Hopefully that's not a common issue, but they were quick to send a replacement out. There's also included knuckle grip covers that you can use. It attaches through a hole on the bow. The ShadowShot works differently than sensor-based VR bows. Since there's no electronic communication between the bow and your Quest, you need to coordinate your physical movements with your controller inputs. Basically, you're physically drawing the bowstring while you're using your controller buttons to interact with the game. This creates an interesting challenge. You need to sync up your physical draw with your button presses. I found this works in 2 main ways depending on the game. One, for games that use the trigger button to draw and fire arrows, like Apex Construct, you'll physically pull the bowstring while pressing the trigger. For games that use the grip button, like 𝐂𝐻𝐍𝐄𝐒, you need to hold the grip button while drawing the physical bowstring, then release both simultaneously. The second option can be a bit tricky sometimes. It's a bit like patting your head while rubbing your belly. I tested the ShadowShot with several VR archery games to see how it performs. The results were mixed. Let's start with the good news. The bow works incredibly well with games like Apex Construct, In-Death Unchained, Hollow Point, and Battle Bows. These games either use the trigger to draw and fire or have bow mechanisms that align well with the ShadowShot's design. For Apex Construct specifically, the experience was fantastic. This game is perfect for the ShadowShot because you can use the trigger button to draw and fire arrows instead of the grip button. Hollow Point also worked well since it uses the trigger to fire. You also have a couple of settings options. I recommend switching to auto quiver in the game settings so you don't have to reach back for arrows, which can make finding the ShadowShot string awkward. Games that didn't work so well in my opinion were 𝐿VN and Tiny Archers, which was much trickier to use with the ShadowShot. These games required you to hold the grip button to draw the bow and release it to fire, which doesn't sync naturally with the physical bow. Both of these had bowstrings that didn't match the position of the ShadowShots very easily. In its relaxed state, either it was too far forward or too far back feeling. Having tried both the ShadowShot and the Artemis bow, let me share some key differences. The ShadowShot is lighter and simpler to set up since it's entirely mechanical with no sensors to worry about. However, the Artemis bow spoiled me with ease of use. With the Artemis, when you pull the string, the game knows exactly what you're doing thanks to its sensors and SDK integration. The arrow fires when you release, no need for controller inputs at all, and it feels much more natural. With the ShadowShot, you have to coordinate physical movement with button presses, which requires some practice. Another physical difference I notice is the finger hold placement. On the Artemis bow, the finger holds right in the middle of the arrow, which feels natural. On the ShadowShot, it's positioned a little above the center, which felt slightly off to me. The ShadowShot is also significantly cheaper than the Artemis bow, even when the Artemis is on sale. The DeadEyeVR ShadowShot is an interesting VR accessory with both strengths and limitations. Is it compatible with all VR archery games as advertised? Technically yes, but with a big asterisk. While it can physically work with any game, the experience varies dramatically depending on the game's control scheme. For games like Apex Construct that use trigger controls, ShadowShot is fantastic and really adds to the immersion. For grip-based archery games, it's more of a mixed bag that requires significant practice. The ShadowShot's definitely more of a pure mechanical solution compared to sensor-based competitors like the Artemis. This means that it works with more games, but sometimes at the cost of intuitive control. Would I recommend it? If you primarily play archery games that use trigger to draw the bow back and release the arrow, like Apex Construct, In Death Unchained, absolutely. The added physical nature is worth it. If you're mainly into games that use grip to release and draw, you might find it frustrating at first, though it can still be rewarding if you can master the coordination. It's now something I can imagine myself using regularly with certain games. So if you're into VR archery and are willing to learn which games work best with it, the ShadowShot could be a worthwhile addition to your Quest accessories. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to do the thing and like and subscribe. And as always, keep on creating and never lose that drive to improve. I'll see you in the next one.